Our next task involves setting up a little bit of ground cover or some little bushy objects or grasses that will surround parts of the set here. To help me out with this, I'm just going to go and hide the point cloud. I'm actually going to rename this point cloud to the trees point cloud. And I'm just going to hide it for the moment here. So I can also hide the emitter objects as well. In fact, I could even put all of these objects here into another group and just call it temporarily hidden. So maybe I'll do that. And I'll just hide the contents there. Okay, so it's really useful for me to see the weight maps that I already have, and I'm going to paint a new weight map to represent little bushy grasses. So I'll go and select my emitter object and get a new weight map for it. I'll rename the new weight map to bushy objects weight map. And I'll start painting again. So the grasses are probably going to be built up a little higher than normal around these structures simply because they have been destroyed and abandoned. So we want to make sure that we're not actually getting grass in these houses, but just around them. So definitely up around where the fence posts are. We'll maybe leave a little bit of clearance there. Again, just take the time painting this so it looks good. Of course, if you rough this out, it's not such a bad thing either, because you're always able to make changes right up until the very end. So all along here, if it overlaps some of the garbage a little bit, that's okay, we can always paint it out. You're not going to really see it so much as it gets into the forest, but can't hurt to have a couple little grassy patches. Maybe all along the side of the road as well. Again, I can just blend that all together. Maybe we have a couple of sprigs kind of growing out in the middle of the road, just because it probably hasn't been traveled in quite some time, and even by the side of the house here. Alright, that might be a little much, but we'll see where that takes us. I'm going to create a brand new point cloud. Another empty point cloud. So this will be the kind of shrubs or bushy point cloud. And we'll add another ice tree to this and build it in much the same way we built the tree. So I'll speed up a little bit here. I'll create an ice tree. And I'll make sure I get my emission node. Emitter, emit from surface. Set it up right away so that it emits a total number of particles. We'll go with maybe 1,000 to begin with 0 speed. I'll plug in here. Bring my emitter in by dragging and dropping, and plug into the emitter port. And once again, I'm going to need to filter that emission based on my second weight map. So if I look under emission control, I'll filter it by my weight map, which plugs into the execute on emit port of the emit from surface compound, and it doesn't resolve again because it's looking for something called weight map. We've renamed our weight maps. We have 2 of them now, and I'm going to be pulling in the bushy objects weight map weights value. So wherever that map is, that's where my particles appear. So I'll bring in the actual shrub I'm going to use now, or the grasses that I'm going to use. I'll do an import.xsi again. And let's see what we've got here. We've got I believe it's the bushy plants, or the grasses, grass clumps here. I'm bringing the grass clumps. And when you have an object selected, they're actually brought in as children of that object, so I mistakenly had the emitter selected. So once again, I'm going to be dividing these grass clumps into groups and randomly distributing them along the particles. If I just frame in on what I have, there are my grass clumps, so they're kind of all pointing in different directions. If you have a look at each object, I likely want to take the center pivot and move the center to the middle of each object, so I'll just do a center to bounding box for each one of them. In fact, I can just multi-select them, not this grid here, and middle click there. Maybe what I'll also do is take all 4 of them into an object view so I can work on their center pivots without being distracted by other scene objects. I'll lock the object view down and I'll focus on the pivot now. So I'll take all 4 center pivots and locate the pivots at the base of the objects. Alright, Alright, that looks good there. And then I probably want to randomly assign the axes so that, like, for example, the X isn't always pointing in the same direction. So X here is defining grass blades that are moving along the positive X-axis. This one defines the opposite. So actually we're not too bad. Maybe what I'll do is just rotate some of these pivots a little bit. So I'll take this one and I'll just skew these pivots so that the grass flow is random. Okay, I like that. I'll take all 4 of those objects and freeze them, freeze their operator history, and go back to an object mode. Alright, so they're almost at the origin here, which is great. I'm going to put them into a group, 4 objects in a group. We'll call this the grass instance group. And once again, we'll pull in an instance shape node. I'll go into my tools, I'll go into data access, pull in the instance shape, and use it to drive the shape input of the emit from surface compound. And once again, use the pick session to pick the grasses instance group. So what I should have now are a whole bunch of objects instanced along my point cloud. If I actually double click here, I should be able to size the grass blades up. You can see they weren't really that large at all. Looks like I've got something going on with the shaders as well, so I can clean up the shaders on these objects very quickly. If I look into the materials, sometimes the .xsi brings in materials that, I don't know, just don't work as well as they could. So if I have a look at these grass clumps, let me see what's going on them. So I actually have some vertex colors, and if I look at each of these objects here, these ones don't look so bad. Let me just double click on the shaders, make sure there's no transparency on the objects. It likely looks like a result of the vertex maps that might be on them. Actually, here they are right here, grass clump. Okay, so this one actually has an image. If we detach the images, I have a totally transparent grass clump here. There we go. Another grass clump. Again, just make sure all of these guys are working properly. Okay, that looks okay. I don't think this colors any of the grass clumps. No. So I can delete that. And I'm actually just going to rename this. So here I actually have the material library. This is my tree material library. And this one here would be my grass clumps material library. Let me just rename that. Grass clumps material library. There we go. If I look on each of the grass clumps now, they look a little better. They're still using what looks like a vertex color map for each of them. If you actually click into the clusters folder, there is a vertex color map per object. So I can delete that and use the actual shader if I want to, or again use the actual vertex colors from the shader itself. I'm just trying to delete one of them so you can actually see the result. There we go. So you can actually see how that sort of sets itself up there. So I'm actually going to use the vertex colors, and we can always modulate those through ICE at a bit of a later time. So with all of these little grass clumps working now, I'm still only instancing one of them because I haven't indexed into my instance shape. I have 4 grass clumps now, and I'm actually looking at the first one. So if we randomize using a range, again we use our polymorphic ports here to auto data type, and I'll set the instances between 0 and 3, again because I have 4 objects, so 0 and 3 would be the 0 would be the first, 3 would be the fourth. So I have a lot more now, and if I start increasing my particles, I get a lot more clumps of grass. Once again, if I jump in to my grid, I could paint up increased weight values to add more particles to certain areas. So that's kind of useful. draw a render region around this. One of the nice things about dealing with instance geometry is just how fast everything renders, and you can actually see that the colors aren't quite the same as what we see in the OpenGL, so that'll be our next problem to tackle. But the nice thing is we're adding a lot of just randomness to the scene here. I might even want to go in and fix up some of the orientation of these particles, maybe align them a little bit better. If I jump back out, again, we might be using a lot of particles to represent these patches of grass. All right, and that will all render off, again, very quickly. Keeping in mind that each particle patch of grass is 8,000 polygons, that's not so bad. Or actually maybe even less than 8,000. Let's just have a look here. Each grass clump is 1,000. So we're dealing with 4,000 polygons instanced, in this case, 40,000 times. And so we don't get a bad result there. A nice savings in geometric objects. So as far as shading the actual particles go, the grass clumps, I'm actually going to have to pull the vertex maps into the render tree for each of these objects. So that will be my next task.